we'll get this thing going. And we are recording, and I'm coming off a weekend of not feeling too hot, so I apologize if I'm a little foggy. But Randy, how about you introduce yourself? Or how about both of you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Randy Ireland. I'm co-founder of Citizens Against Political Persecution, as well as Americans for Justice. You can find us at www.a4justice.org. We're an organization that seeks to unite Americans around the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and due process. And, the one thing I'll say is, we're here in America right now, we're fighting on so many different battlefronts, whether it's election integrity, medical freedom, the political prisoners, the southern border crisis, CPS and child trafficking. And the one thing that they all have in common is really the lack of due process, which it was born out of the Constitution and born out of the Bill of Rights. Every single U.S. citizen has constitutionally protected rights in the forms of the Bill of Rights. So that's really what we're about. We're an organization. We're looking at establishing chapters in all 50 states. And part of that is working very, very much really at the core of what I do is really January 6th and the political prisoners. Regardless of what you think about the crimes that were committed on January 6th, every single U.S. citizen has a right to due process. And in this particular case, for political reasons, these guys are being held in solitary confinement, locked down 22, 23 hours a day, denied medical service, medical treatment, denied religious services, denied haircuts, barbers. I mean, it's been going on now for a year and a half. I think we're up to what, 589 days?
591.
91 days. And so, one of the things that Micki and I have been doing is we're here in Washington, D.C. A lot of people may not know this, but the January 6th political prisoners, we have 34 of them right now at the D.C. jail. We call it the D.C. Gulag because of what they're going through. And every night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, they all stand up, unite, and sing the national anthem. And so we came to the D.C. Jail to D.C. this month to stand in solidarity with them outside the jail and to sing the national anthem with them at 9 p.m. So we're there at the jail every day this month. We're probably going to extend that into next month.
We're working on it.
But we're there at the jail. We invite everybody to come out and join us from 7 p.m. and we're always there till at least 9:30 p.m.
Yep.
And with that, I'll let Micki introduce herself.
I'm Micki Witthoeft. I'm Ashley Babbitt's mom. Ashley Babbitt was the woman shot at the Capitol on the 6th of January. We're here to stand in solidarity with our political prisoners. Like Randy said, 591 days in. They're being denied access to their family as well as all the things Randy listed. And it's just inhumane treatment. It's an American-born right to protest and to exercise your First Amendment rights. And even if you don't support what they were there protesting, you have to support the American right to protest.
And so could you explain to a layman like me why it is that they still have not been given a fair trial? Why it is that they're just locked away and the keys run away?
Well, political persecution, really. We stand, I'm sorry, there's something in my throat. We stand on the corner of the jail where they can see us, and everybody else in that jail, visitors walk right past us to see their people. But it's simply our people that don't have access to their families.
A lot of it is done under the shroud of COVID-19 and the vaccines and all of that. That's the excuse they use, But at the same time, there are some of our J6 political prisoners that have gotten the vaccine, but still are not allowed to use or to have family visits or even video visitation, while everybody else in the jail has that ability. So
it's just one more way to break them, and it's my belief that they want them in this solitary confinement in horrible conditions so they'll take horrible plea deals because if they're shown their discovery against them and that is exposed, then that will expose the culpability of the FBI, the bad behavior on the Capitol Police that day, and not just the murder of my daughter where Michael Byrd publicly executed her, But there were 4 American unarmed citizens that died at the hands of the Capitol Police and Metropolitan Police that day. And I think that, you know, at the very least, we need to investigate what went on that day. I mean, an honest investigation, not the January 6th political show trial that's been happening.
Now,
Me too.
yeah, we're both Goffins, right? But there, no matter how much of a BS reason it is, what is the official reason they've given? Because I doubt that maybe they have. I don't know. They're pretty evil people. I doubt they've come out and said they're political prisoners, even though we all know that's what it is. So
Well, it all goes back, it really all goes back to the Patriot Act. You know, when 9/11 happened, the Patriot Act was signed into place. Really what the Patriot Act is, it allowed the federal government more powers to go out, you know, find terrorists and to prevent another 9/11 from happening. Now, at the time that President Bush signed it into law, there was a 10-year expiration date on it. And really, I mean, everything that was put into place at that point in time primarily applied to foreign terrorists, not domestic terrorists. And over the process of that 10-year period of time, and when Obama took office, Obama renewed that at the end of that 10-year period into the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act.
Yeah.
And it's been renewed every year, 2 years, or whatever the case is. But when he renewed that, he basically opened it up where the federal government could point their finger at anybody, call them a domestic terrorist, even for a social media post, which is First Amendment protected free speech. You know, and there are some limitations to that. We all recognize that. Supreme Court, you know, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, different things along that line. So there are some limitations to the free speech. It's not open to everything. But what's happening is, and what you see, especially with January 6th, is people will have, you know, make social media posts. And the DOJ and the FBI will rip it out of context, put it on black and white paper and say, see, this person's a domestic terrorist. And that is how they have weaponized, you know, something that initially had good intent in keeping the American people safe. But what it has really done is watered down and stripped away our rights, our freedoms, our liberties. And more importantly, it's given the federal government this idea that they are the end all be all, that they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. And it's a runaway overreach of government. There's no other way to describe it. It's tyranny. And when you look at, you know, what existed prior to January 6th to what is occurring right now as a result of January 6th, I mean, January 6th was an excuse for the FBI and the DOJ to move over 50 and reassign over 50% of their assets. You know, prior to January 6th, 90% of the counterterrorism was devoted to foreign terrorism and foreign terrorist threats. January 6th gave them the reason that they needed to completely flop that on its head. Today, 10% of counterterrorism is focused on foreign threats. 90% is focused on domestic threats.
And that might be easier to understand if you knew that the biggest threats to this country as deemed by the FBI are Christians and American veterans. And also, that to me is bizarre that American veterans as a group pose a threat to this country. It boggles my mind. But also 72% of the Americans arrested from January 6th are veterans. So that's something to keep in mind, that these men that are in jail and being persecuted for their activities that day are men that fought hard for the rights that you and I take for granted every day. And it's just such a violation of everybody. And I know I said already, not just their constitutional rights, but their human rights. They're being, you know, the food they have to eat, the thing, and also in DC, the judges that once they do go to trial after they're like we said, you know, some of our men pre-trial detention for 591 days now, but our people that do eventually go get to stand in front of a judge, stand in front of judges that say, every single person that day was the antithesis of a patriot. The only patriots that day were the Capitol Police. And I've seen enough footage of the Capitol Police behaving horribly. I mean, it looked like they wanted to just engage in a street brawl instead of, actually do police, and maybe did things that riled the crowd up. The rowdy people on the front, instead of dealing with them and arrested them, they launched munitions over them into a peaceful crowd. They beat women that day. Women seemed to be an immense target. When we went to Kyle Fitzsimon's trial, the prosecutor introduced footage of Kyle, but in the corner, we all recognize, because we've seen this footage over and over, but I don't even know if the prosecutor realized that he introduced this footage, this evidence, because the bar that they've had to reach as prosecutors has been low. They really just have to go in there and say, he did it. And the judge goes, yeah, shame on you. You did it. You're in jail for, but so that's been their experience. But the prosecutor actually introduced footage of Victoria White getting beat within an inch of her life. And we were all, look what's happening. But those are the things that Kyle Fitzsimons was reacting to. And the fact that there was some violence in the crowd that day. We have, I think 12 of our men are in jail as a result of trying to save that cluster of people that Roseanne Boylan died in. We have a housemate with us at the time, Tommy Tatum, is here with us. And he was under that pile with those people. And Maccabee, Mellis, Lang, and I'm really not sure exactly who else was involved. Were involved in trying to remove those people that were dying underneath that pile of people and render them aid. But in sticking with the theme of the day, the Capitol Police did not want to render aid, and they did not want to allow patriots to render aid. Ashley had a possibly survivable wound if she would have been rendered aid in a timely fashion. But not only did they not do that, they prevented American citizens from rendering her aid. And Roseanne Boylan was already blue and bleeding from the mouth and the nose when Leila Morris raised her weapon up over her head and beat her lifeless body on the ground until she bounced with her lifeless blue self, and then they drug her off by her foot. So disrespectful. These are things that are documented with video evidence. So, it's my position. We really need to get somebody to take a look at that, because the things that happened that day at the hands of the Capitol Police are arrestable offenses. So, and then I also would like to say I do back the blue, but in my mind, the Capitol Police are not the average police force. Every police force answers to external review if something happens, but the Capitol Police Force don't. It's a completely internal review system. Just like, Michael Byrd shouldn't have been there to shoot my child that day because he had a prior excessive use of force issue. He left a loaded Glock in a public restroom for somebody else to find. And it's my position he should have been fired. So when people say those people shouldn't have been there that day, we absolutely had a right to be there. Who shouldn't have been there was Michael Byrd.
Well said. Well said. Could you maybe go over the withdrawal or the lack of rendered aid to the woman under the pile? That's something I wasn't aware of.
Oh my God.
Well, yeah.
It was awful. We, like I said, our housemate, Tommy Tatum, was here, and he is here, and he was laying right next to Roseanne Boylan when she died. So the horrors that he had to see, I mean, he's still affected by it, as I'm sure many people are. But yeah, Roseanne ended up under a pile of people, and there were a bunch of people trying to make a separation between the push of the crowd, the police, and the room they needed to render this woman aid. And they were pepper sprayed, they were beaten, they were told to get the F away from her. And then when the police did drag her out in pretense of helping, they drug her out by her leg and pulled her off into God knows where. And so there is a little bit of missing time there where you don't know what they did with her body between a certain amount of time. But yeah, it's all documented on videotape that, patriots were trying to save her, American citizens were trying to save her, and it just wasn't allowed to happen. And like I said, she was under the pile already unconscious and bleeding when Leila Morris raised her weapon up over her hand and beat Roseanne Boylan's lifeless body until she was tired. They literally killed her twice.
And not only that, I mean, the one thing I'll back up from that, you have Benjamin Phillips and Kevin Greason that was also killed earlier. The two of them, ultimately what happened, and there's so many different levels of complexity of what happened on January 6th. If you were on one side of the building, there's a lot of violence, a lot of, and to be honest with you, I mean, the one thing that we saw that's blatantly visible for anyone to see, we were in the Kyle Fitzsimmons trial last week, Fitzsimon, and the one thing that we saw is so much, and especially what happened there in the tunnel. But I mean, it goes back. The first barrier was pushed or breached about 12:55 p.m. in the afternoon. Trump was still speaking at that point in time. But more when you get up, I think it was somewhere along the lines of like 1:20 p.m. That's when there was a lot of very peaceful people with some instigators and agitators at the very front. And what law enforcement did is they fired a 20-minute barrage of rubber bullets, tear gas, flashbang grenades. I mean, all of this stuff. They fired it from up top over the instigators into the peaceful crowd and the peaceful people. And that's exactly where Benjamin Phillips and Kevin Greason died. Yep. And when they went down, I mean, one of them was hit by one of these flashbangs, and I believe the one exploded within like 2 or 3 feet of him. And so, you know, the official report is that they died of natural causes, died of a heart attack, died of a stroke. And it's like, the fact of the matter is, without those flashbang grenades, they most likely would not have died.
Also, Officer Brian Sicknick. I mean, I believe in sticking with the theme of the day. They did not render their comrade aid, and he had a stroke, and they just told him go lay down. And also, we had patriots that said he doesn't look right. Let me help him, and that was not allowed either. So he died at their hands as well, in my opinion. But you know, that's just my opinion. But what there's video proof of is my daughter's public execution, Roseanne Boylan's public execution, and the monstrosity that the Capitol Police became. I don't know if they suited up that day to go there and behave that way, or if they too just got sucked up in their own mob mentality, but it looked like they were just interested in engaging in street war. There was a man in the corner that was trying to get out, and they kept pushing him back with a shield and beating the shit out of him. Sorry.
No, you can say whatever the fuck you want.
Okay, there you go. And then, like I said, Victoria White, she was a small woman, and you can see the white shirt, which clearly means he's in charge, reaching over people to target her and hit her in the head almost 60 times, at least until he was tired, punch her in her face. And then we don't know what happened after they drug her off. So just their behavior that day is seriously some arrestable offenses going on. And the Capitol Police are so untouchable, which I didn't realize until what happened to my daughter, that they operate with impunity, that they answer to no one, that they're an arm of Congress. They're not even actually a police force. They're a separate arm of Congress. They answer to Congress. They take their orders from Congress. And they're also very, very, very much protected by Congress.
And that's, yeah, I mean, and I'll touch on that. I mean, one thing I do want to just touch on is like a lot of that violence that happened in the tunnel. Lila Morris was Metro PD. A lot of the officers that we saw on the stand, you know, during the Kyle trial, Metro PD. So it's not just the Capitol Police. I think Metro PD ultimately played a much bigger deal in a much bigger role in what occurred on January 6th. But like Micki was saying, 2012, I think it was, I believe that Congress passed legislation to say that Capitol Police could not be FOIA requested.
Oh yeah, you can't FOIA request them either. They're not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. Like literally, whatever they do, they can do, and you can't question them on it. You can't find the evidence. You can't. Michael Byrd was never even interviewed by the police. You know, he was exonerated after an investigation. Well, there was not an investigation. There was never a crime scene roped off. They let my daughter lay there and bleed out, and then they mopped her up like a piece of trash and went on with business. And that's just not acceptable. And it's also not acceptable for him to not have to answer any questions about that day, or his prior conduct as a police officer, or the fact that, you know, he said that she did not comply. Well, I would like to see proof, because, you know, they say there's no footage in the hall. Bullshit. You know, there's a camera right over where it happened. It's our footage. It's American. It belongs to the American people. I personally can't watch it, but I would like people to have the opportunity to watch it that would, you know, be able to form an opinion of, he never told my daughter to stand down. My daughter was well versed in the use of force continuum. She never saw him as a person, much less a police officer. He just popped out, checked his earpiece, and shot her, and with no stand down orders. And if it was so important for him, and he says he did say it, he should have taken off his fucking mask and enunciated, because I saw nothing, and nobody behind that door heard anything either. And let's talk about the 3 police officers that moved out of my daughter's way before she went through that window. And I have seen enough footage where my daughter was angry with these police. She's like, call for backup, call for fucking backup. And then they didn't. And then Zach Alon broke the window. She left hooked him, and then she was up in the window. And I haven't seen any more than that. but I know that I saw a point in her where it turned from frustration and anger with the police for not calling for help to fear. So I did see fear on my daughter's face, which is, it's kind of hard to look back and see that, but small nuggets of comfort are that was a good day for Ashley. She was very proud, very happy to be there until everything went south, which seems to be like so many, like Randy was saying, some people that were on the other side of the building never saw a violent moment and did not realize these things had happened until they got home. If you were on the other side of the building, it was a completely different experience.
Yeah. And the one thing I'll say along the lines of what Micki was talking about, I mean, there were individuals inside that chamber where Michael Leroy Board was. One of them is Representative Troy Nels,
Out of Texas.
And, just the information that he has given and what he has recounted of what he saw and experienced, that should open up an independent investigation into this.
Yeah.
Troy is a very well-respected military veteran himself.
He's also a retired sheriff.
And I mean, his background, how do you hear his testimony of what occurred and not open an immediate independent investigation? And this is the thing. I mean, it just seems like there's so much that comes down from up top. And what it does at the end of the day is it shreds our Constitution. I think there's no day in the history of our country that ought to show the American people just how much we are in for a war for that Constitution, our constitutional rights, the things that underpin our liberties, our freedoms, and our pursuit of happiness. And then at the end of the day, it all comes down to justice. If you don't have justice, you don't have any of those things. You have no reasonable expectation of life, no reasonable expectation of freedom, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. So we need to get back. And again, the power right now, it just seems, and I think every American just kind of has it in the back of their mind, that the most powerful aspect of the United States of America right now is our federal government. And that's just not the case. Our Constitution was underwritten, for our great nation, where we the people are the power. We the people. And that's really why I co-founded Americans for Justice, is to unite people around that sentiment. We can all debate, Americans for Justice is nonpartisan. And it's meant that way for a reason. And the best way I could explain it is this. We can have differences of opinions on policy issues. Whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, independent, libertarian, we can sit here and have those arguments and debates all day long. But if we don't have a foundation in which to have that argument or that debate, we're all losers. And that's the message that needs to resonate out with American people. We essentially, a lot of people don't realize it, but essentially we are a communist country at its core right now. And nothing shows that more than January 6th. Although you see that in all on these other battlefronts. Without a stolen election, you don't have January 6th.
Right.
Without.
And maybe without COVID, you don't have a stolen election. I mean, I don't know. But that, going to what Randy said about being nonpartisan, I believe the American people are, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, I believe as citizens, we are closer together on things we agree on. We have more things in common than things that we don't. I think when our leadership gets involved and tries to convince us we hate each other, or that you can't live next door to somebody that's a Republican and not do battle with them. Because I think that overall, this country lives side by side with different cultures, different religions, different political persuasions, and just different ways of life. And I believe we live in harmony with each other for the most part. And, go about our daily chores, thinking about our neighbors as people. Do they take out their trash? Do they mow their grass? They pick up their dog shit. I mean, I think these are the things that we care about in our neighbors, not whether they are Republicans or Democrats. And I think that we want the same things. And I think until our leadership gets involved, we're happy with pursuing safe schools, good streets, police that will come to your door when bad things happen. Or, all the things that all of us as American people want, the right to voice our opinion, whether you agree with people or not, their right to say these things. It's an American foundation. So, once again, I'd just like to say, even if you don't agree with what the people were there protesting, you have to support the American right to protest.
Yeah. Randy?
Yeah. Just, I didn't say all that.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. But yeah, I mean, I think, well, kind of hand in hand with that. The one thing that I would say is, and I heard this from, I believe it was Kash Patel, at the Great American Reawakening tour event in Rochester that I was at last weekend. One of the things that he said is that the number one enemy of the people, and Trump has said this in the past, but I think Kash really showed the number one enemy of the people is mainstream media. Mainstream media and a free press, contingent, in our safeguards, we're a nation, our constitution, our government, everything was built by our founding forefathers with checks and balances in place. And when even those checks and balances become corrupt themselves, that's why we find ourselves in the situation where we are today. And number one in that, hand in hand with big tech, because obviously, censorship. Okay, maybe it's not the government doing it, but the government's doing it through big tech, allowing censorship and deplatforming, people silencing people's voices in the public square, as you will. And mainstream media, and again, I mean, I think a lot of it is you have these handful of media giants, conglomerates that have bought up all the local news and TVs and all of this, where you've reached a point where the government now, basically from up top, gives the narrative that they want. They leak it. I mean, how much of the discovery in January 6th alone have you seen leaked purposefully by the FBI, by the DOJ to mainstream media to present the narrative that they want the American people? It's propaganda. And again, it goes back to Obama. 2012, Obama repealed through executive order legislation that was meant to prevent the federal government from using propaganda against its own people.
Mm-hmm.
We need to go back and put that in place. And more importantly, mainstream media enjoys certain protections as being part of press, constitutional First Amendment protections for press. Those protections ought to only apply for truth and fact. If they report false information or withhold true information to paint a certain narrative, they ought to be they ought to be sued, and they ought to be able to, or have to pay to the fullest extent of the law. And that's really, I think, where when the whole notion is that the mainstream media is the biggest enemy to people. Mainstream media is meant by intent to be the last line of defense that holds a tyrannical government in check, that calls out their bad actions, that calls out their hypocrisy, their lies, their slander. And right now, it's basically an extension of a state-run media.
Yeah, even the hit piece they did on Ashley. So I'd like to say a little bit about her as well. Ashley was a dynamic woman, an independent woman that anybody would be proud to have as a neighbor or a child. She committed to the Air Force when she was 17 years old. She was in Alaska by the time she was 18. She did 4 tours of duty in the Middle East. She was wounded on her 21st birthday, air flighted to Germany where they saved her life, but her womb was shredded, so she lost her ability to carry children. So ultimately she gave her youth, her life, and her ability to have children in this country, and then she was denied rendering of honor simply for her participation in January 6th. And that's just so ludicrous to me that somebody could, and it was one, and it's my belief that it was one lieutenant general in the Air Force that denied her rendering of honors. But we had a lovely ceremony for her too, but it was just a further slap in the face because she did dedicate her life to this country and she loved this country, and her intentions that day were to go and redress her government like she thought she had the right to do and like she did have the right to do. And they absolutely did not have the right to murder her, and nobody has answered for it for 591 days now. And even the one interview that Michael Berg did with Lester Holt, where he was throwing big softballs and just had to say what he wanted to say out there looking like a dumbass Barney Fife of the police department. He even admitted, well, I didn't see her hands. I didn't know she was female till later. I saved the world. the things I want to say to Michael Byrd and Nancy Pelosi is just, and as far as the January 6th committee hearing goes, I don't know how they can have a committee hearing without saying names like Ashley Babbitt, Roseanne Boylan, Kevin Greason, Benjamin Phillips, and Michael Byrd. If he's your fucking hero, put him up on the stand and ask him some questions, because I would like to see him answer some real questions.
And what do y'all think about? Wasn't it like 4 Capitol police officers all committed suicide within like a month or something?
Yeah.
What do you think that was?
Yeah, it wasn't within a month. Within the first, I believe, within the first month, there was 2 suicides. And I actually believe it was within a matter of weeks of January 6th. But then it was like later, I want to say it was in the month of June, 2 others. One at the beginning, one at the end.
Well, we don't know, because we don't hear too much about that. It'd be my personal opinion, and that maybe they were some of the good officers that dressed up and went there that day, and maybe they were the ones that were going to say this isn't right. You know, what happened isn't right, and so they got Clinton. That would be maybe my way of looking at things. But who knows? That's the real truth, is who knows. But I do know that the January 6th committee hearing, there was the former sergeant at arms for the Capitol Police that was supposed to testify the next day, and he
Oh yeah.
he caught some death the night before.
Oh yeah, that wasn't that long ago, right?
Yeah, he was supposed to be. He was supposed to go before the committee.
Yeah.
And he was killed the night before. So if that's not some suspicious shit, I don't know. And all these things. One coincidence maybe, 2 coincidences maybe, but this is just a pattern where they feel like, and they really feel empowered to do whatever they want to do. When I went to the jail, I went to Guy Reffitt's on my first night there. It was the 1st of August, and I went to Guy Reffitt's sentence hearing. So I was with Nicole and her daughters, and we know that, the J6ers sing the national anthem. So after, hanging around all day, we went to the jail to sing with them. And we were in the parking lot, and the guard came out and said, well, you can't be in this parking lot. We're like, well, we're singing the national anthem in the capital city of the United States of America. Shame on us. But he called for a bunch of backup, and we started up the sidewalk. And by the time they started coming out of the building like cockroaches and chased us up the sidewalk. And one of them got in, and Nicole Reffitt is she's a saucy thing, but she's not very big. She's a little tiny woman. And one of the guards, the detention facility guards, got all so in her face that I took my phone out, and I was going to record it because I thought he was going to hit her. He was like all up in her stuff. And in the minute I took my phone out, he turned his aggression on me, and he smacked my hand and knocked my phone out of my hand. So I'm just thinking these detention facility guards feel so empowered to treat these men like throwaways. And this is how they treat a couple of women on the sidewalk. 6 of them, took 6 of them to come assault us. And that the empowerment they must feel, and the way they feel that they're able to treat our people inside is just speaks for itself. And they have been treated horribly. We've had one man have his hands zip tied behind his back and beat until it blinded him permanently. They say awful things to him. They deny. We had one man that had an abscessed tooth. He had to take a staple out of his paperwork and go in after his own abscess. And I don't know if just the thought of that is just so disgusting. I mean, just disgusting, the way they think they can treat these men like they're throwaway, because there has been no recourse. We had a couple of Congress people show up at the door and bang on the door and say, let us come in. We know you're treating our people horribly. And they said, no, you can't come in right now. You can come back, come back in a week. So then they did clean some stuff up and make a couple of changes. And then our Congress people went back, still deplorable conditions. And there's been nothing since. There's been no further action. Why can't these men have visitation for 591 days? That's some isolation. That's just one more way to try to break them. Just one more way to try to break them. And if it is because of COVID restrictions, they've been relaxed and they've been lifted. And I feel the same way as like when COVID was at its height and we had our senior citizens dying in a hospital alone because they didn't want to let the family members in there to get the COVID. Well, I think it should again be your personal choice. If you want to take a chance on getting COVID from going to see a man that's not vaccinated, I think that's your personal choice. If you want to take precautions, wear a mask, whatever you want to do, I think again, that goes to personal choice. If your loved one is behind bars and people have their own reasons for refusing this vaccination, then I think that should be your choice. That if you want to take the risk of exposing yourself without being vaccinated, that should be, again, your choice as an American citizen to opt out of this vaccine. But that doesn't mean you should be isolated from people that need you and that you need. Some of these men have children they haven't seen in a year and a half.
Yeah, that's insane.
It is.
Sorry, I'm kind of you're very you're very hypnotizing to listen to. You carry the conversation well. I forgot what I was gonna say. Well then, what?
I don't know. I just sometimes I do tend to talk pretty.
No, it's great. It's the greatest aspect you can have as a podcast guest is someone that takes the reins and takes over. So what is it that the average person can do, or what is it that will inevitably happen, just in terms of probabilities? Will something happen when a majority in Congress changes? If I know Joe Kent just won his jungle primary, and he's visited the J6ers before. I believe Anthony Sabatini has, who's coming up for election tomorrow, I believe. Mike Collins from Georgia has visited the J6ers, and he won his Congress seat like a month or two ago. So realistically, what would it take? Would it be new faces in Congress? Would it be a shift in the makeup of Congress? Would it take a new president? Will it just take a breaking point? Will it take someone with money? What is it? I'm not to ask you.
Question. That is really a question I wish I knew the answer to. I am counting on some fresh faces in Congress because that couldn't hurt. And I believe, it is my belief, if you could get any person to take a look at what happened that day with an open mind and without clips that are cherry picked and pre-selected, I believe you would also have every single person that watches raw footage of that day will go, oh my God, there were, and I'm not saying, like I said, we're not here to decide who was naughty and who was nice. Some boys were misbehaved, but I personally didn't see anything worth 590 days in solitary confinement. But, I think that if any single person with an open mind would watch that footage, they would see the reprehensible behavior of the Capitol Police and at least open an investigation into that and realize that Americans that were there that day, for the most part, were peace-loving people wanting to be there to and law-abiding people. That's the thing is, when you see these people with these cherry-picked clips, it's like, Carl Fitzsimons, he was reacting to seeing a woman getting beat in front of him, and that goes to third-party defense. It's like, it's your obligation as a human to prevent murder that's happening in front of you, and it doesn't matter if the perpetrator is wearing a uniform and a badge. They're still committing murder. I mean, Leila Morris, like I said, I know I brought her name up again, but it's horrific if you go back and look at it. She literally beats Roseanne Boylan until she's tired of hitting her. And then 2 weeks later, she gets touted as a hero at the Super Bowl. But it's just so mind-boggling to me that this woman is still employed as a Capitol Police officer and that this footage is out there. And who do we get to have to look at it in order for it to make a difference? I don't know. I wish I knew the answer to that question because we tried to show it to everybody.
Randy?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, let me go back to your original question. Like, what's it going to take? I mean, what's that?
I said, yeah, what is it going to take?
I mean, there's so many different levels to it. Well, number one is, the one thing I will say is there's a lot of people that have been fighting on the front lines of this and exposing a lot of this as much as they can. But there's so much more that needs to be done. I mean, there's so much video footage out there. I've been involved with this, really since the beginning with Kara Casanova. Me, Kara Casanova, Carrie McBride,
David Summeroff.
We're the ones who really looked into and exposed a lot of what she's talking about with Lila Morris.
Yeah.
Because up until then, it came out that, Roseanne Boylan was trampled by Trump supporters trying to get into the Capitol. Total bullshit. Then it came out after the autopsy that she died of a drug overdose. Total bullshit. And then that's when we really started kind of looking into things, and we identified and we found clips showing Lila Morris doing what she did. And then, and the immediate aftermath of that, Philip Anderson came forward. I was holding Roseanne Boylan's hand when she died, when he believes he was holding her hand at the moment that her life left her body. And so, and he also, like Jake Lang, he's one of the J6 detainees. Philip Anderson credits him with saving his life. He said, without Jake being there, pushing back and fighting back, I would not be alive today. Tommy Tatum, same one, right there beside them. The fact of the matter is what happened was, those law enforcement officers in that tunnel, Capitol Police and Metro PD, pushed so hard and so aggressively that even in spite of screams, because Roseanne Boylan's best friend, Justin, was standing right there screaming, you're killing her, you're killing her. And
You
that's
can hear
really,
that. You
that's
can hear
really
it.
what made a lot of these guys. And the one thing I will say, you watch these videos, there's so much video of it that's available, even without releasing Discovery. But Ronald Maccabee was a sheriff at the time. He was there on the front. And it's like, you watch the video of it, he took substantial blows trying to push them back and get those cops to stop so that life-saving services could be rendered to these people, including Roseanne Boylan. And it's like, how does somebody like that get his door kicked in, gets arrested, gets fired as a sheriff, and is now, he's been what, 390 some days, indefinitely detained. I mean, somebody like that who stepped up into action, you know, to me, he's one of the biggest heroes of that day. He really is. And it's like, this is the thing. I mean, what's it going to take? I think the short answer is there's a lot of things that we can all do on a day-to-day basis. You know, at the American for Justice website, we have a call to action page. There's 6 or 7 different things that can happen. Every single American can write a letter to their state's attorney general. And I explained that, you know, in the first section of that call to action page. 95% of the arrests that occurred related to January 6th. The FBI and the DOJ created their own arrest warrant and their own search warrant, then went on to sovereign state territory where they have no jurisdiction, and they effected or executed their own warrants. The U.S. that is a direct violation of the U.S. Constitution, U.S. Code, and the state constitution. There's a function of all of that called the extradition compact that lays out exactly how a federal agency or a federal agent is to effect an arrest warrant. Now, what you need to understand is each of the 50 states is a sovereign nation state unto its own. Federal government has no jurisdiction whatsoever. That means that if they want to arrest somebody, they have to go to a state agency, whether it's the governor, whether it's attorney general, or even the county sheriff. They then have to look into it and make sure that everything's on the up and up. Then they are the ones who go and execute a search warrant or an arrest warrant. And then they bring that individual back to the magistrate court there locally, who then, that's all part of due process. You know, that due process is in place to protect each U.S. citizen from illegal search and seizure, from the overreach of the federal government. And the reason why I mention all of that is I just wanted people to understand only an attorney general has a direct line to the Supreme Court. Anything that they bring to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court has to make a decision on within 28 days or consider it within 28 days. And so only the state's attorney general has the power to bring a writ of habeas corpus direct to the Supreme Court, where they would then have to look at this. Now, we have 250 years of precedence here in America, where the Supreme Court has upheld the sovereignty of the states over the overreach of the federal government. And so that's probably the quickest way to get all J6ers out, all charges dropped. Because the moment that, you know, if the Supreme Court was passed down a decision in line with what they've done the last 250 years, immediate dismissal, immediate release. So that's one of the things. The other part of it is in the cases here in DC, every single one of these J6 cases are being tried here in Washington, DC. And all these judges sitting from the bench, and we saw this in person a couple of times already, where there's blatant bias on the parts of the judges. I think every single one of these judges at one point in time within their own courtroom in session has said that anybody who thinks that the 2020 election was stolen is a conspiracy theorist. Like she said, we've had judges that have said, you know, the only patriots that were there that day are law enforcement. Bullshit. When you have military veterans, decorated military veterans that have gone out and sacrificed so much for this country, right? And they took an oath to the Constitution. The reason they stood there in Washington, D.C. at this event, at this rally, is because they took an oath to the Constitution. And for these judges to sit here and say that they aren't patriots, who are they? You know, that really boils my blood. When a judge never, ever did anything in this country, sacrificed in any way for this country, want to take our national heroes and say that they're not patriots,
Right.
put them in jail indefinitely and treat them the way that they are?
Right.
Bullshit.
Or murder us and not have to answer to it. You know, we're getting to the Carl Fitzsimons trial because, you know, lawyers have been an issue in this situation and the judges have too. And we were worried about them getting a fair trial in DC, but after the January 6th committee hearing, now it's a question of whether they can get a fair trial anywhere in this country. But I do want to say, what was the defense attorney's name?
Natasha Taylor Smith.
Natasha Taylor Smith. She's a public defender in DC. And she was Carl Fitzsimons' public defender, and she was amazing. You know, she brought up I thought she was going to make Officer Ganola cry like a baby. He usually cries because he's so proud of himself, and according to him, he single-handedly saved the earth that day. But he's just so full of, and he's so used to people telling him what a hero he was, that he could not take some real question. He became very combative when the defense attorney called him out on his shit, and he was like, well, I don't know, I see what that picture says, but I know I was there when the picture clearly shows Carl Fitzsimons not touching his person or his shield. And she was like, well, you know, is it possible that you have a financial interest in the way this trial turns out, and once you said it was Carl Fitzsimons, you had to stick with that because that was your story, and isn't that the truth? And she grilled him like a hamburger. It was amazing. It was amazing to see her work so hard, because she is actually a liberal Democrat, or a liberal, I don't really know, I'm not exactly sure what her persuasion is, but she defended him like he was her little brother. And I think that it was amazing to see. And she also pointed out the fact that, you know, some of those Capitol Police weren't behaving so well that day, and also you know, addressed the fact that Carl Fitzsimons was seeing Victoria White get beat within an inch of her life. And I don't even, like I said, I don't even know if the prosecutor knows what he put up on the screen, because they're so used to just going, yeah, this Trump supporter, he did it. And the judge goes, yep, guilty. I mean, that's been our experience. And then, you know, if you can get a judge to in Guy Reffitt's case, he was not given the enhancement charge, but he was given 7 years, and he didn't even go inside the building. He didn't assault anybody that day. He didn't go inside the building. He was rubber bulleted and pepper sprayed, and still he got 7.5 years, but he didn't get the enhancement charge. But he did have to listen to the judge say, you know, everybody there that day was wrong. They were the antithesis of a patriot, and, you know, all the things that she says to all the Trump supporters. And I also heard her say something that disturbed me, where, well, I'm going to go look back and see how my colleagues decided on this, and I'll base my opinion on that. Well, you know, you're wearing today, Judge Friedrich, you're wearing the robe. You have the gavel. You tell us what you think. You know, you listen to the evidence and you decide. Don't go back and base your opinion off these unfair decisions that have already been made. You know, you're the judge here. You have the robe. Obviously, you know that because you're talking down to us like we're a bunch of peons. So obviously, you know that his fate is in your hands. So I think that she should decide these things herself and not go backwards and look and see what other people have decided. But these are the things we're up against, you know, and the Judge Contreras, I think, is the judge in Carl Fitzsimons' case. And I would just hope, because in my mind, the public defender disproved at least 3 of his assault charges, and went into the fact that there were possibly extenuating circumstances for his assault charges, because he was seriously trying to get to Victoria White. And in the process, he had an unstrung wooden bow, and he threw it. This is the kind of shit we're up against. He threw it in the direction of the police. First he yells, please don't beat her. Please don't beat her. Please stop beating her. And then he throws this unstrung bow. It glances off another Capitol Police officer and then off the wall, and comes back and hits the lady that was a Capitol Police officer that was a witness at that time. And it hit her in her riot helmet that is designed to take a bullet. And it took a glancing of a stick. And our lawyer's like, well, where did it hit you? Well, I don't know, somewhere around here, but I felt it. Well, they're counting that as an injury and an assault on a police officer, because she was grazed in her riot helmet with a stick and couldn't even really tell you exactly where it hit her in this helmet that's designed to stop a bullet. And they want to talk about, you know, excessive use of force. Well, every time they brought up the excessive use of force, it kind of turned my stomach, because I'm thinking, you know, they definitely used excessive use of force on my daughter. They definitely used excessive use of force on Roseanne Boylan, on Kevin Greason, and on so many people that we haven't even heard about yet, because when there's a lot going on in that crowd. There's also footage of this one man that breaks the police line, and he does run up, and like, I'm gonna say 7
Capitol Police officer hold him down on the ground and beat the shit out of him. And he's not even resisting. He's just laying face down on the ground, getting kicked, getting baton, getting beaten. There's footage of that out there too. So I would just hope that, you know, like you said, what's going to have to happen, and would it be fresh faces in Congress? I hope so. But like I said, it's my opinion that if you can get anybody in a position of authority to actually look at some of this footage, that they would not be able to not take action. So I think that, you know, that's the answer, is to get some of these things in front of people, you know, and then have, you know, I went to CPAC and I talked to Ted Cruz, and I asked him when he was going to do something for the J6ers, and he said he's trying so hard. And I want to know how he's trying. You know, I understand he's up against a wall, but I think that, you know, if you kick a wall hard enough, long enough, it's gonna, I just don't understand where all the effort is. I mean, where are our people? You know, you expect the left leaders to, oh, those are just Trump supporters, and let them go away and just throw away the key. But the silence on the right has been deafening, you know, and that's why these people think that they've just been throwaway people. You wouldn't be surprised how much they feel like, you know, America has just forgotten and thrown them away, because that's very much the case. We don't have our leaders standing up and going, no, at the very least, these men are entitled to their American-born rights, their Constitution rights, their human rights. We seriously treat political prisoners better than we treat the people that are our hostages right now. Nancy Pelosi's hostages for 591 days now.
Micki, I think you need to start a podcast.
Kind of along the lines of what she's saying. I think ultimately, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you know, when things are going to change, it's when we successfully change the hearts and the minds of the American people. And it all goes back to what I was saying about we the people and uniting and coming together. The fact of the matter is, there's enough truth out there that exists openly in so many different places. For the average American to look at some of this stuff objectively, don't believe what you see on CNN or MSNBC or any of these other outlets. Hell, don't even believe what's on Fox. Forget Fox News. Forget all the news. There's actual real video of exactly what she's describing. I know, I've seen thousands of hours of it in doing the research and investigation that I have done.
Another thing too, at the Kaufman's Simon's trial, they had the FBI up there, the FBI witness up there, and he's supposed to be some expert. And you have you have the prosecutor kind of leading them along, and like, okay, we're gonna say this, we're gonna say that. And he goes, well, have you put in a lot of hours watching footage? And he was like, yeah, I've looked at case after case after case. And the prosecutor, well, how many hours would you think that you've looked at that footage? And he said, at least 50. And I thought to myself, shit, we did that at home just this weekend. Randy watched 50 hours of footage just this weekend. So him to think he's some kind of expert, because over the course of, 10, 12, 15, I don't know how many cases he has, if he's looked at this footage for 50 hours, that's nothing. That's nothing, especially since to actually see what's going on, because if you watch any clip from that day, there is so much going on that who was it that put up, when they try to put up behavior, this is CNN, I believe, they try to put up footage of people behaving badly, and we're looking in the background going, that's Leila Morris beating Roseanne Boylan to death. So they put that footage up on TV, on CNN, and didn't even know what they had just shown us. But my point is, 50 hours of looking over this tape is really nothing, because you have to slow it down. You have to frame by frame it. You have to look at, seriously look at what happened. And you have people that are piled under each other and trying to, get through the pile of people. You do have to put the time in to slow the footage down and see what actually happened.
And that doesn't even take into account these FBI agents. I mean, every single J6 defendant has a statement of facts. That is the basis for going out, getting an arrest warrant, and doing everything they're doing. And specifically, I want to call out this FBI agent, Thomas Ryan.
I bet you do.
I do.
I know.
Because it's when you actually look at the statement of facts, what they do, and this is the part of it where the FBI is just so evil, absolutely evil, is they'll take a screenshot, a screen grab of a video, and then write this lengthy paragraph talking about how this shows Kyle Fitzsimmons grabbing a shield. When you actually slow it down in a court of law, frame by frame by frame,
he didn't.
Kyle never touched that shield. Never touched that shield. And so the judge for the last year and a half has kept Kyle indefinitely detained in the DC gulag, treated like he had on that one screenshot. He knows he's lying.
He knows he's lying.
And this is, if he doesn't know, he shouldn't be an FBI agent.
Absolutely.
FBI agents are supposed to be above politics. Law enforcement is supposed to be above politics. And these people are operating strictly and solely on politics. And I think that's one of the things that are most refreshing that came out of the Kyle trial is, like she said, the public defender.
Amazing.
We know the public defender worked for the Hillary campaign. We know she voted for Joe Biden. That's, she won't, that information is there. It's on our social media, it's whatever. But the fact of the matter is, she recognizes, even in being a Democrat and all of that, she recognizes that every U.S. citizen has the constitutional rights of what they believe. And if they believe that 2020 election was stolen, there are certain things that we are given, rights that we are given, protected First Amendment rights, free speech, peacefully protest, a redress of grievances. And I think she masterfully communicated that, kind of put herself out of her shoes, put her into the shoes of Kyle and what Kyle's thoughts were.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing that she eviscerated the FBI and the DOJ on that was countering. The FBI likes to rip things out and play God in terms of what someone's intent was. Why did this person come from the state of Maine all the way to DC? Well, they came because they wanted to storm the Capitol. They came because it wasn't good enough that they didn't win the election, so they wanted to go in and actually change the election. That is what the FBI and the DOJ would have you say. But the evidence shows that a person came to peacefully protest. He called up his congressperson in advance of this, asking them and begging them to do the right thing, contest the electoral votes that were cast. That is that's a constitutional process. And the FBI and the DOJ, they are far, and even the judges in these cases, they reference as if the higher bar and the higher priority is the peaceful transition of power. If you have a stolen election, how can you possibly have a reasonable expectation of a peaceful transfer of power? And I think Dabney Friedrich is one of the judges that in the sentencing for Guy Reffick. She said, here in America, if people have problems or if there's irregularities in our elections, we have courts in place to handle that. But every court case that was brought against pertaining to the 2020 election was found to be baseless and was tossed out. Excuse me, Judge, the whole reason why 70+ million Americans today believe that election was stolen is because every one of those challenges brought to a court was tossed out without being heard or the evidence looked at.
It was just
That judge gave the very reason of why that election was stolen in the first place.
And also,
And either she's incompetent to actually believe the drivel, or she's a willful, complicit person covering it up.
way to clean that up, Randy.
I'm just saying, there's only two ways you can go about it. I'd like to think that she's incompetent, saying what she actually believes.
Right.
But at the same time, then why are you a judge in that position?
Right.
You ought not to be there.
Right.
You need to get out. We need to find a way to get these judges out.
And
If you can't leave your politics at the door and decide cases on fact,
or decide it for yourself without looking back and see what unfair decisions your colleagues have already made.
right?
But another thing that the public defender did was a good job of was to not let the FBI say that, every single person there that day had their own intentions. It's like, just because this person had these intentions does not mean they speak for Kyle Fitzsimons. Kyle Fitzsimons' intentions don't speak for John Mellis's intentions. They all went there to redress their government. But if there were people behaving badly that day, that's on that individual, not on the group as a whole, because everybody had their own behavior and their own reasons for being there that day. So she made that clear too. Like I said, she defended him like he was her little brother, and it was very impressive to watch.
Yeah, I mean,
And she made Ganol cry, so that was a plus for me.
she what?
She made Officer Ganol
Canal.
Officer Canal, she made him cry like a little bitch. It was good for me. I don't know. It was good.
I think it was better when she kind of got him fired up. It was like she would ask questions, and it's like very simply, it goes to show that he's lying, and it's almost as he could register in his own mind, oh my goodness, that's not what happened.
Right.
Then how dare you question me?
Right.
I'm a hero.
He actually would say, I'm a hero.
I'm the one that can never become, I can't do what I've always wanted to do in law enforcement because I have a shoulder injury.
Oh yeah,
You know,
worst pain ever.
Yep.
It was on the tail. I mean, his little shoulder strap harness got pulled, and it was the worst pain ever. It was a 10 on the Richter scale.
And I would love to be one of those insurance investigators that kind of follow a person around and vote videos and take photos of what a person does. Because I dare say that in his everyday life, there's no injury. He's using this as an excuse to cash in and get out, and
it's got several
disability to this and disability to that.
And several civil
piece of
cases.
shit.
He's got several civil cases going. He's actually been paid for the upwards of 60 interviews he's done, where he just hears himself say the same thing over and over again, and he's convinced himself that that's the truth. And he has a book deal pending, so he does have a financial interest in the way this trial turns out. And he got up there and lied his ass off, and she called him out on it, and it was a beautiful thing to watch.
I think the most telling thing is the title of his working title of the book. An American treason, an immigrant's story of saving democracy.
Saving democracy.
Something
He saved
along that
democracy
line.
that day.
I mean, you got to commend the delusion. Got to commend the ability to be that delusional.
You know,
Well, the delusion for him though flips to the other side. This is the thing. He spent almost his entire time since all of that, being home on leave or this or that, going and looking at clips and turning those clips into the FBI, trying to write up, how come you're not going out? And then he goes out in public and gives these interviews. Hey, well, how come you're not, how come you're not charging this person for like 60 years? Why are you putting this person in jail for life?
and then he said also just some things were just stupid, because like we said, like the aggressors, who I believe were FBI FBI infiltrators or hired FBI people to be there, some Antifa imports. And instead of dealing with the people in the front line that were being aggressive and being violent, like we said, they launched their munitions over into the peaceful part of the crowd. And he at one point in the trial said, well, we kept shooting them with canisters of tear gas, and it was just making them angry. Well, no shit, Sherlock. It's like, what do you expect? You're firing on, a man standing there next to his wife and he sees her foot get blown up. You think that's not going to make him angry? Of course it's going to make him angry. You have people like Coffin Simons who are right there at the face of the tunnel watching. Victoria was the most extreme that I can think about, but she's certainly not the only one in that tunnel that took a beating. They did almost kill her, and I don't know the extent to everybody else's injuries, but Coffin Simons, like I said, he's right there watching her take baton blow after baton blow after baton blow to the head. And as an American citizen, you want to prevent that. Not just to mention, men have this protective, they want to protect, I don't want to say a chauvinist comment, but men inherently protect women. And he saw a woman getting beat with an inch of her life, and he was called to action from that. And like I said, to me, I think that's admirable. I don't think, and it doesn't matter that the person beating her was a cop, because every time I watch it, I'm like, what is it about her that made him want to hurt her so bad? Because he was reaching over other patriots. He was reaching over his own police officers, just cracking her in the head. Like, you're like, you can't even really watch it. It's so painful to watch. And I just don't understand why it was her that he just targeted like that. Like, he just had to beat the shit out of her, like over and over and over in the head. And they had just talked about how, when you strike somebody in the head, that's use of lethal force. So he repeatedly hit her in the head and punched her in the face.
So, and one thing, let me just tie it all up like this. Like I said before, there's so many different levels of complexity. And one of the things is, we're sitting here talking about that one tunnel and that one that we're carrying on about a lot of what transpired there. And that is a big part of it. But if you kind of back up out of this from a high level, 10,000 square foot view, then what you really see is Why was National Guard support not there that day? It was authorized by the president. I mean, you have the chief of Capitol Police came out with his statement, gave his timeline. He requested it 2 days before. He requested it the day before. The day of, 5, 6, 7 requests for it to the Capitol Police Board. Capitol Police Board, there's 2 individuals that was basically the decision maker. You have a third person that was never ever asked or consulted. That's the Capitol architect. But you have the Sergeant of Arms of the House, Sergeant of Arms of the Senate. One reports directly to Pelosi, one reports directly to McConnell. Okay. The Sergeant of Arms of the Senate, that was Stenger. I think his name was Michael Stenger or Marcus Stenger, or one of them, forget his first name. But he's the Sergeant of Arms of the Senate that was there that day, kind of presided all over this. We mentioned earlier, he was murdered. He was cold blood murder. He was dropped off. While walking across the street to his apartment building, he was gunned down. He wasn't the only one. There was 2 individuals that were gunned down that day. And the reports are that a portion of that was captured on video. So why is the mainstream media not reporting that? Mainstream media is reporting, well, he was diagnosed with cancer. Get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? But I mean, it's these kinds of questions that need to be asked. Let me give you another question. When President Trump was done speaking at the ellipse, right? And everybody then started kind of making their way to the Capitol. That's a 40 to 45 minute walk. There was law enforcement officers that people shook hands, fist bump, back to blue, took selfies with, was joking around with. Why is it that not a single law enforcement officer that day? Because keep in mind, the Capitol had been breached prior to Trump ending his speech. Why did not one single law enforcement officer put up their hands and tell the patriots, hey, stop, don't go there. The Capitol's been breached, don't go. Right? Any other state or town in America, when law enforcement responds to a scene and knows that something's going on that shouldn't, the first thing they do is create a perimeter and make sure people don't go. How come that didn't happen at the Capitol? Right. Hours after hours, they're still just letting people go. Yeah. Why? I mean, to me, this is elementary. Why is that question not being asked, much less answered? Right. Where was communication? I mean, somebody from the high on top did not spread the word to the law enforcement officers scattered throughout the city that day. Well,
And we met just recently, like this trip, like I'm gonna say probably a week ago, we were talking to a Capitol Police officer at a gas station, and he had no idea, you know, who I was or who, not that I'm anybody special, but he had no idea that I had a vested interest in the question. And we were talking about the Capitol breach, and he said, well, from what was going on over the radio, it didn't sound like a big deal. It sounded like, oh yeah, I know what was happening was much worse than we got the impression over the radio. So was there an urgent call for help, or was it orchestrated exactly how they wanted it to be? And why were they understaffed? And the staff that they did have, if they weren't expecting a large crowd, they sure came in their riot gear. You know, they came in their little gas masks, and, you know, they're complaining about, oh, it was so hard to, Officer Gunnell, you know? Yeah, Officer Gunnell complaining about how hard it was to breathe in the tunnel because of all the tear gas. Well, it's you people spraying it. You cops are spraying each other. You're spraying the crowd, you're spraying each other, the wind's blowing this way, and you got a face full of tear gas. Well, there's a shocker. You know, I mean, they're just like literally spraying it into the wind and then complaining because they can't breathe. But the thing is that they weren't interested in gaining control. They were interested in street warfare, and they did it the way gangs do it. They lined up with the front people, and as soon as the front people got tired of kicking and punching American patriots, they rotated the back and brought up a fresh group to punch and kick American patriots. And then when they got tired, and it went on for hours like that. And I just wish that somebody would look at the fact that they did not operate as a police force that day. They operated as a street gang with better weapons, shields, and face masks. And then, you know, oh, poor us, we can't breathe through our face masks. Well, stop squirting the shit. You know, I mean, everywhere. You know, and Officer Gunnell also said, well, when we use it, we do short 2-3 second bursts in people's face. That's not what I saw. I saw you empty your canister right in people's faces. Just empty your canister, and then, you know, complain because it's hard to breathe. And he also said, oh, I had effects of that 2 or 3 weeks later. I could still feel the chemicals on my skin. Well, you know, that's too bad. sorry for you, only not really.
But another question to ask about that day is this. I think it was January 6th, the very first event ever in Washington, D.C., where there were 0 counter protesters.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's always counter protesters in
Yeah,
DC.
There's always, I mean, I've been part of myself probably 20 different events where there were counter protesters.
sure.
Why was there no counter protesters that day? The fact of the matter is, the reason why is because Antifa, BLM, and these individuals, they donned the MAGA caps to blend in.
Right.
You
And
know
why
what I mean?
why were the people that are around my daughter when she was shot the same people that were there when it's just like the same 10 faces keep showing up. If you watch Epic Times, The Truth About January 6th, the people that were standing beside my daughter when she was shot are the same people who were there when the first breach originally happened, and also not been picked up by the FBI. You know, John Sullivan, who sold my daughter's snuff film to CNN for $95,000, did what, 2 days in jail? I mean, I'm really not exactly sure of the thing. I know I don't want to misquote myself, but he's not in the gulag with our J6 defendants, and he profited from my daughter's death. Michael Byrd has profited from my daughter's death. He set up a Give, Send, Go, and Adam Kinzinger, who sits on the January 6th committee as one of our Republicans, donated $200 to Michael Byrd's Give, Send, Go fund, and then bragged about it. So I think, I think that should make him have to recuse himself. And our other Republican was Liz Cheney.
Oh God.
I mean, how does that help us? Liz Cheney doesn't even know which side of the fence she wants to fall off on, but I hope one day she falls off that fence and somebody eats her. But I think that's pretty much what has happened, because I think it's bye Liz. But my point is, she's already done the damage. She was already one of our 2 people on that committee that really didn't do anything but make it worse for us and further perpetuate the lies that have already been told. And do we need somebody on that committee with our one hope as a Republican, as somebody that donated to Michael Byrd's Give, Send, Go fund? I don't think we do. I don't think we need him.
Well, this is the thing that I've said for the longest. You're not going to fix the corrupt system by using a corrupt system.
Yeah.
What you're basically asking for us to do.
Right.
When you have people that don't even know the Constitution or the Bill of Rights getting elected into office, I mean, how do you expect them to uphold the Constitution?
Well, I'd like to ask AOC to recite the preamble to the Constitution of the United States. I would like to see if she would even know how to
Listen,
start it.
I would like to see the test given for immigrants that they have to take to gain residency or become a resident of this country. I would like to see all of Congress take that very test.
I bet I couldn't pass it. I have friends that are first generation immigrants from Bulgaria and Kosovo.
Bet you they
Yeah,
could.
Oh yeah, no. They the green cards for several years, and they both became citizens like 2-3 years ago. Yeah, their knowledge of America far exceeds mine. I mean,
Exactly. Well, that's my whole point. I mean, I've been involved with a lot of people.
But you're not a sitting United States senator. You're not a sitting
True.
United States congressman. That's when you should definitely know that document front to back and
Sure.
execute it on a daily basis. And I think we're so far removed from that. And it just seems to be, one more violation of the Constitution. Well, no big deal. And it is a big deal. And people that say, we need to move past January 6th. Well, guess what, people? American citizens were unarmed. American citizens were murdered that day. They were beat that day, and they've been unjustly jailed and had the key thrown away. That should be a big friggin' deal to every American citizen, because this, and people said it before, at this time it's them, next time it may be you. And when they decide to take your rights away, then maybe it will matter to you. But, I don't know how mad I can be at the American people, because a year and a half ago, you would have had to convince me that the FBI was capable of these things. So you would have to convince me that, the Capitol Police as a unit did bad things that day, because my whole life I have been pro-government, pro-government, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A law-abiding citizen. And I believe in back in the police. And I still, to this day, even though they murdered my child, with the exception of the Capitol Police, I believe that most American police officers get up every day and put that uniform and that shield on and go out and want to do good things and protect American people. And I believe most of them that do put on the badge would lay down their life for you and me, as they have sworn they would do. But I think, like I said, the Capitol Police are a completely different circumstance, or a completely different entity. They're just their own private club, you know, and then that's another, the way that that Nancy Pelosi acts. It's like, how dare the unwashed masses show up at the palace, because she really believes that's her little personal playhouse. And when she's, no person is above the law. Well, let's look at her husband's recent drunk driving activity. You know, was he
right.
above the law? Did she go right to her nephew, who's the governor of California, and go, hey, Gavin, Uncle Phil's down, what's his name? Uncle Paul's down there and he got picked up. Can you go get him out of jail? And then that got swept under the rug. Again, going back to the fact that the mainstream media is in bed with the government, because, you know, if that would have been Trump's kid, I don't want to use Trump as an example, but, you know, he sprung to mind. So if that would have been Don Jr., you know, that would have been all over the news. How many people know Paul Pelosi got picked up for drunk driving and actually had an accident to the point where his eye was black and his mugshot was really ugly, but you didn't get to see his mugshot. But like I said, you know, if it would have been on the other side of the aisle, that would have been slandered and just plastered everywhere. But no, I would venture to say that most Americans don't know Paul Pelosi got in a drunk driving accident.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'll just hit on is kind of like what you were saying. I personally believe, and this is the thing, this didn't happen yesterday. This didn't happen overnight. You go back to, and again, I think it really went into full. It certainly had started long before this. But when Obama first took office, that's really where the screws started changing in a lot of this. Where these people, and then those people that were put into position of authority within our government, whether it's Comey, Clapper, or Brennan, all of these, they weaponized the good of Americans who believed in the good of law enforcement, in our justice system and everything else. They weaponized that against us. And that's what people need to understand. The people in blue, the people we've always looked at as to safeguard us, as to protect our rights, you know, to all of that. These are the people right now in power that have been working for decades. You know, we refer to it as a deep state, or, you know, however you may want to think about it. But look at what the FBI's record is over the last, I don't know, 2-3 years. I mean, with the kidnapping plot that never would have happened without FBI involvement.
Yeah.
That was ugly.
Whitmer.
Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah.
And then you look at January 6th. And again, right at the funniest thing about it is, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but the FBI agent in charge back at the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot was miraculously promoted and was in place in DC before January 6th. Coincidence. Not only that, but now you look and see what's happening with Trump and Mar-a-Lago raid. You know, the FBI is the heart and soul of the deep state. And I don't think you have to peel too many levels of the onion away before you see the same thing in our intelligence community, whether it's the CIA, the NSA, and some of these other, and DOJ. There's no distinction between the DOJ and the FBI. And again, I mean, the one thing I will say is, because I'm going to correct you on something.
Me?
I'm from New York. Yes, I'm from New York City. I deal with the NYPD, right? And this communist takeover, you know, that really started in large part, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Comey, Brennan, and Clapper, two of those have bragged openly in public about being communists. Comey and Brennan.
Well, I was unaware.
Okay, and what I'm gonna say is, when they were appointed by Obama, I've had 4 retired FBI agents tell me that at that moment in time, we noticed a big drastic difference. Conservative leaning people were not hired, and conservative leaning people within who stood up and questioned things, they were pushed out. They were passed over for promotion. I have seen this single-handedly the last decade that I've lived in New York City with the NYPD. Good officers being forced out because they go out and they do their job, but you have a corrupt DA, bail reform, and all this other crap. When you go out and you arrest people according to the law, and then you have a DA that opens the jail doors and lets them out onto the street, how often do you think a good cop is going to stay there and keep doing that? This is what I'm saying.
That's a good point.
You know, I'm not saying that the vast majority of law enforcement today aren't good people that want to do good things. But I'm telling you, we're reaching a point where there's far more of the bad cops willing to do whatever they're told for that pension, for that whatever, than the ones that stand up and know the right from wrong and have the balls to actually do what's right. That's what I'm seeing. So,
Well, I've had minimal contact with law enforcement, so I'm just saying, Randy.
you're not in this line of work
And I'm
without
not,
having.
I'm not, and like, I'm from California, so my experience with the police would be completely different than what Randy's
Yeah.
experience would be, and I wouldn't argue that because I've heard similar things, but I just mean with the spirit in which
Sure.
police officers go forth with their day, I believe they have good hearts and good intentions. So when I'm bashing on the Capitol Police, no, I mean only the Capitol Police,
Yeah.
and possibly the Metro Police.
Yeah. And well, we need to wrap this up because I got another podcast in 5 minutes, but I would love to have you two back on. That was fun. Y'all are fiery. And I will put in the description the websites you guys gave me. Everybody listening, please go visit those websites. And anything else you want me to put in there?
We're at the jail every night from 7 to 9:30 to sing the national anthem and stand in solidarity with our American political prisoners. So we'll be here till the end of August, and we may be extending that, but absolutely till the end of August from 7 to 9:30 around the backside of the jail where they keep our people. So if anybody wants to join us, please do.
And I did send you a flyer. I don't know if this.
Yeah.
But this weekend, especially, we're gonna have a big weekend there at the jail.
Yeah.
Kicking off on Friday at 7 p.m., 6 p.m.
It's all in the flyer.
It's in the flyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put that in there. Micki, Randy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you
It's
so
been
much.
a pleasure
That
talking.
was awesome. I'd love to have you guys on again sometime. That was awesome. God bless. Stay safe.